there is nothing as unequal than the equal treatment of unequals. And I do not necessarily personally like the concept of managing people. I prefer the concept of leading them. And again, leadership, sometimes you lead from the front, but very often you lead from the back. So we are in a unique position to be able to really, I prefer to say a business hub than a financial center. I think we need to be a business hub. This ought to be the vision.
Hi everyone, I've got a small favor to ask. I know that many of you have been watching these conversations over the past couple of years with people who inspire. It would mean a lot to us and it would help us continue to have these conversations if you would just subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Richard, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, and it's very exciting to have you. Richard, you must be a busy man on retirement, if I may call it like that.
Well, I am busy, but I like to think that I'm positively busy, doing the things that I like to do. Not that what I did before retirement was not what I liked. I always enjoyed what I was doing professionally. But I think it was my objective, in fact, when I decided to retire, and I could retire from my corporate world,
Yes.
from Abax and Ocorian at the time, was actually to work around 35 hours per week.
Amazing.
And do at least 80% of what I do. I really like to do it. I'm working a bit more than 35 hours normally, but as far as the 80% is concerned, absolutely. I've gone beyond that that KPI, if I may say.
Yes.
So I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. I'm busy, but I'm so happy to be busy doing what I'm doing.
And if I may say so, you look like you've rajeuni by at least a decade, or that you haven't aged at all. But I guess my first question to you is going to be, and again, I hope you won't be embarrassed by the comment, but I met a couple of people a few years ago, and they said to me, Richard is one of the best leaders we've encountered. So my first question was going to be, in your opinion, what makes a great leader?
Yeah, well, thank you for that comment, but I think if you had seen other people, you might have had many more people who could have said the contrary to that as well, Okay. So what makes a great leader? Let me answer in the context of a professional context, not a political leader or whatever, because I think I'm not in that field.
Sure.
And I will tell you what I've seen, what I've lived through, and what I've seen with my colleagues, with other leaders that I've come across and so on. I think leadership in a professional context has got to do with you as an individual, but a lot of it has got to do with the ecosystem. I think, in which ecosystem are you evolving? I've been evolving in an ecosystem where there was, I would say, proper governance, there was the right communication channels and so on. Obviously, then it's something that you have an influence on as a leader of an organization. So it depends on all this. For example, if you look at culture, the company culture, what is a company culture? And how does your leadership style align with the corporate culture or not? So when you're a CEO, you normally have the leverage to be able to influence the culture. You have the possibility to influence the governance, the communication channels, the HR framework. The HR framework is also very important. When you have the ability to do that as a CEO, then you've got a better chance, I think, to feel at ease in your leadership style. But if you're not, then you may have to adapt to the culture and to the ecosystem of the organization. And that brings me to the other point. So the ecosystem and so on is important, the ecosystem, the culture. The second point, I think, is to embrace the concept of situational leadership or adaptive leadership or agile leadership. For me, I think what I've always seen is that you need to be able to adapt in your leadership style to the person that you're leading and to the situation or circumstance in which that person is acting. For example, if someone is new into a job, let's say he's been promoted into a job, it could make sense that you need to handhold that person. You know, you cannot expect necessarily that person to be doing whatever they need to be doing first time. So, whereas if the person is into the job for so many years, then obviously you need to be able to let go the person. So the delegation, for example, is a key part of leadership, I think. So you need to be able to play with that. And for the same person now, that person might be good in one particular thing, but might not be in a new project, for example. So you need to adapt your leadership to the circumstance and to the situation. The thing is, if you don't explain this to the people, then people tend to think, but why are you leading this person like this? And why are you leading me like that?
You're treating different people differently.
Yes. But then that comes to the point of exactly that sentence, let me try to remember it. There is nothing as unequal than the equal treatment of unequals.
I love that, but you're going to have to unpick that for me.
Yeah, let me get it back again. So there's nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequals. People are unequal, so you can't treat them equally.
Yes.
I think the key word for me is equity, in fact. It's really to be fair to different people, depending on who they are, their personality and so on, and also depending on the work that they're doing or the project they're doing at a particular point in time. So yeah, so sorry to be a bit long.
No, that makes complete
reply.
sense. Yeah. And it reminds me what you just mentioned. It reminds me of something that I feel quite strongly about when I hear people talk about equal opportunities. I always say equal opportunities is based on a myth that everyone starts from the same position.
Exactly.
And they don't.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't start from the same position, and they are not in the same position at any point in time. Yeah, so you need to take into account equity. You know that definition of equity against equality, where I think there's two people, one is tall and one is not that tall, and they are looking at a football match or something over. I mean, the guy who's tall, he just stands and he sees whatever, and the one who's not, but he doesn't see anything. So you need to be able to help that person, stand on a chair or something. So, but if you treat them equally, then that's wrong. Whereas if you treat them with equity, I think it makes all the difference. So I think leadership has got to do with this. And then it's got to do with you as an individual, your own set of values, and how does that, again, align with the organizational values and so on. To cut a long story short, I say, if I'm going to lead in a context where my values are not aligned with the values of the organization in which I have, I'll try to make it work. If it doesn't, I leave, I quit. And if I can't sort of have an influence to change the corporate values or culture, I quit. Because otherwise, you are not aligned with yourself. So I think leadership has got to do with these things. Yeah.
Would you therefore say, given the context that you just described, that you have different leadership style, or do you have a main style that you then adapt to different situations?
I think the best is to have different styles that you adapt. You may have a sort of de facto style. You're someone who listens well or not, whatever. But you absolutely need to have, you have to have some key core elements, but I think the key is really to be able to adapt. I think the other thing which is important is the spectrum of intelligences that you apply in your leadership. Obviously, we know about IQ. EQ is absolutely important, especially with the new generation. There's a lot of EQ that they're expecting. You have to be able to apply the EQ. You just can't think that people will be happy if they don't actually understand their emotions. And that takes time to be able to do that. So it's not only understanding the emotions, but also applying intelligence to it. I love a short podcast that I saw from Jack Ma, the CEO of Alibaba in China. I mean, you wouldn't expect possibly Jack Ma to say that, but in one of his podcasts he says, IQ is important, EQ is important, but most importantly is LQ. LQ?
What is LQ?
LQ for him is love intelligence.
Jack Ma said that?
Yes, CEO of a multinational. You wouldn't expect, isn't it?
No,
And he
surprised.
said that. And he insists on it. And he explains the love intelligence by actually, you need to love the people. You need to love the job. You need to, obviously then you've got different forms of love. How do you apply an intelligence to a love intelligence in and within your leadership? I think these things are extremely important. And as I said, then you need to adapt it to the circumstance and to the people. Yeah, but I think these are the fundamentals which are important for me.
And do those qualities, did they come intuitively to you? One of the reasons I'm asking is that at the very start of when I launched the podcast 3 years ago, I had a number of leaders from the offshore industry, well, offshore, we don't say offshore anymore, from the global business industry.
Yes.
Apologies, don't want to end up on the blacklist again. From global business industry, from the big four, from conglomerates, and most of them said that these are traits that they had to acquire with time. What about you? Did they come intuitively to you? Did you have to learn them or learn on the job?
You have definitely intuitive traits, personality traits, which is good that you understand. So psychometric tests, personality tests, and so on, I think are important for you to understand yourself. I think the other thing which is extremely important is to have 360 feedback. When I was talking about the HR ecosystem, for example, to have a good 360 feedback have helped me a lot, because then you know how people see you. Because sometimes if you don't do that in a structured manner, then you think you have got an image.
Right.
You think about you like this and that, but there's nothing better than people telling it to you. And it's not only your boss that needs to tell it. It's not only your peers, but the 360. At Abax, I was appraised every 6 months by 15 people across the organization, all levels. 15 people, 15 different people every 6 months. So at the end of it, you learn a lot about yourself. So yes, you've got these intuitive traits, but then if you take the time and the effort to know more about you through personal development tools and through tools like 360 feedback and so on, you then adapt yourself. And sometimes I was talking about different forms of intelligence. I mean, the word intelligence is important when you associate it with emotional love or whatever else. Why? Because if you don't apply the intelligence, if, for example, you apply EQ, but you're very emotional. Yes, you understand the emotions of people, but you're so much involved in their issues, for example, that you don't have the detachment to be able to really see the person and the issue. The person is one thing, the relationship is different. So you need to be able to make the difference between assessing the person and assessing the relationship, So applying intelligence to that is extremely important. So if you're not careful, your intuitive traits might be a quality in your leadership, but might also turn against you. So
it might blur your judgment.
It might blur your judgment. It might not send the right message to different people, and therefore you need to be able to apply this intelligence. And that's why feedback, I said 360, but whatever type of feedback is extremely important. Yeah.
But I would have thought sometimes quite hard as well to hear. Was there anything that from what you remember where you felt surprised because you never thought that someone would perceive you in that way, and you kind of were either surprised or disappointed? Yes,
indeed, and that's how you learn, and that's how you grow as an individual. Yes, one thing, for example, is that I've been criticized by some people not to be tough enough.
Oh, really?
Yes. I mean, why is this person still in the organization? You should have fired that person.
Right.
My intuitive trait was, let me see what I can do to help the person grow. The person is not performing well in this area. What about trying to put them in a different area? So it works sometimes, but there's a limit. So when you start to get this sort of feedback on a regular basis, then you ask yourself is, okay, what I had to learn from it. So that's the sort of feedback where I was probably applying love intelligence too naively or too much. So you need to find the right balance. And feedback helps you a lot to do that. When I was talking about ecosystem, there's also for example, in an HR ecosystem, the competency framework. You know, what are people supposed to do? So that helps people to be quite clear on what is expected. And in your leadership, it helps because it's a tool where when you have a conversation with somebody, you're less subjective. You're more objective about what are the skills and so on that the person is supposed to demonstrate. So that's why I was saying we should not see leadership on its own. There's the person that you are, but then there's the ecosystem, which is extremely, I think, important. Yeah.
And have you felt in your previous role that there's a huge gap, because sometimes we confuse the two concepts of management versus leadership?
Yes, there is indeed. For me, in a nutshell, if I try to keep it as simple as possible, I would say leadership is more about people. Management is more about processes and things like that, and operations. This is the way I normally see it. And I do not necessarily personally like the concept of managing people. You know, I prefer the concept of leading them. And again, leadership, sometimes you lead from the front, but very often you lead from the back.
So you push them forward?
Yes, let them go. If the person is mature enough, has got experience enough, you let the person do whatever they want and you say, you do it, and then you inform me. Whereas if the person isn't ready, then you need to lead from the front. Come on, guys, let's go together. And for me, one measure of success is really, okay, let me think of this person, let me think of this project or this piece of work. How rapidly can I lead from the back?
Right.
So for me, that's an objective. As soon as I can lead from the back, I'm sort of move at the back and the person takes and I follow. I just follow. So that aspect of leadership is also extremely important in my view. Yeah. So, and that's quite different from management. You don't manage the person.
Yes.
You adapt the leadership so that you can be in the front or at the back. For me, the image is that, you know, when you look at the Olympics, there's a race in cycling, I'm not sure what it's called, where sometimes you see people, a team of cyclists, and you got one of them leading, and then they change. That idea, that image for me is the image of leadership in terms of how can I now let go to someone going in front, I go to the back, you know. But that also requires a lot of self-confidence because sometimes you want to be in the driving seat.
Yeah.
So you can be in the driving seat, you can be a co-pilot to sort of give direction. So you can sit at the back and say, come on, drive. I'm easy.
And also I would say that it requires you not to be insecure, because I think if you're secure in your leadership and you know that, okay, I've got a vision and I want to achieve this, this and this, then it becomes less about your personal branding, but more about, okay, well, I've got all these people who I'm looking after, let's empower them and let them shine.
Yeah. And that's why, again, I didn't mention vision, but all these things about vision, values, and so on is key. That forms part of the ecosystem I was mentioning. It is key. If you don't have this, then I, as a person, would not be able to claim that I'm a good leader at all. I do need this to be able to operate properly. Yeah.
When you left Abax, I think it was already Ocorian at the time. Did you feel ready? In the sense that, did you feel, I had a vision, I achieved it, I'm now moving on to something else, but let me phrase it differently. Did you have any regrets? Things that you wish you'd done differently? Or did you feel, no, I've done what I set out to do and now I'm ready to move on?
When we started Abax in 2016, I think, we crafted a vision. And we said that vision is going to take us for the next 5-7 years. And actually, in about 2012, about 6 years down the line, we all felt, the management team, the leadership team, that we've done it.
Really?
Now we need something else to sort of look up to a new vision. And we then found a new vision. We worked at a new vision. It took us 1 year to craft a new vision, all the consensus and so on. Crafted a new vision. So when I left in 2018, 2006 was the start, not 2016.
Yeah, I thought that
2006,
yeah.
excuse me. So when I left in 2018, that vision I'd crafted, we were absolutely doing it. When we sold Abax to Ocorian, because then Ocorian took, and obviously as a big multinational, they've got a different vision. So that vision that we had crafted around about 2012, roughly, we had done 80% of it. So to your question, there were two visions at different points in time, and both visions the first one was done, the second one we were quite happy about where we had reached. And if you ask me whether I could have been doing things differently, yes, absolutely. In the leadership of people, in the decisions about, different officers outside of Mauritius,
Right.
in some big projects that we had, obviously, yes. But by and large, I was extremely happy with what we did. And I say we because really it was the whole team of leadership as well as the whole of the company. So, yeah, there was a sense of, yes,
Achievement.
box ticked. Yeah.
Do you miss it? Do you miss the global business?
No, I don't. I don't miss the global business because I'm still involved in a way or another.
Yes.
I'm not in the corporate world. I'm doing consulting, but and some of the consulting I do is within the global business sector, the financial services sector. So I don't miss it because of that. And also because at different points in time, you do things in your life, professional or personal life, and then you have to move on. You move on to something different. And today I've rethought about my vision, professional vision, what I want to do, more like my mission, in fact, my purpose and mission. And personally, and now the professional part, dovetails into that. And so what I've done is behind me, I'm like looking ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's not the right thing to look in the rear mirror too much. When you drive, you look ahead.
Forward.
You just have a glimpse at the rear mirror, but then you move on.
And I think one of the things that stood out quite a lot with Abax, and I think that was tied to your vision, is that you were, when everybody was still very much focused on India, you were one of the first MCs who saw the potential of the African continent and how crucial the role of Mauritius was in that. Recently, and I'm sure you've read the excellent thought leadership piece that the MCB group wrote on harnessing Africa's potential. Having said all that, I still feel that this is a conversation we keep having over and over and over again, that the potential is there, but somehow either we're missing a trick or the obstacle are still quite huge. What are your thoughts on Africa in so much as it relates to Mauritius and our role in making that vision happen?
I think we've done a lot. But at the same time, we have done so little compared to what we could have been doing or what we should have been doing. And I think this comes to the point of an unclear vision by the political leaders that we've had and also by the industry. And I think the industry has been fragmented and not moving as one industry. There's always been a lot of people thinking in one direction and others like holding back. If you will remember how many people clung to the GBC tools, for example, and didn't accept that we are a jurisdiction that needs substance, that we do need to encourage economic substance. But then when BEPS came, the base erosion and profit shifting, now we say, okay, we have to do it. But a lot of people, among myself, but a lot of other people were saying, come on guys, we need to establish a vision. We need to establish certain rules. But the industry did not think the same. When I say the industry, I mean the industry players.
Large, yes.
Yeah, at large. But then there was no leader of the industry as such. This is where political leadership is important. What does government want for the financial center? And I think this has been lacking for many, many years. I think very grateful to those who invented our offshore sector at the time, our global business sector 30 years ago now, I think, roughly. And so, yes, homage and hats off to them. I think they did a very good job to give birth to that industry. But then he sort of changed a little. And then over the past 20-ish years, it hasn't changed much, to be honest.
Stagnating.
It has stagnated.
Yeah. Meanwhile, while it's stagnating, others have come in strong.
Absolutely.
They've invested in it. And even countries like, I look at the UAE, for example, even though they have their own issues. But when I look at the UAE, for example, they've established corporate tax, they've established substance, they're doing all that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And yes, it's still, for individuals, at least it's still zero tax. But then there's the ecosystem to encourage substance. People, an expat still today, I feel, would rather go to the UAE than come and establish his family in Mauritius.
But that said, it's never too late.
Sure.
There's plenty of things that we need to do. I'm very happy to see that, the new ministers of finance, junior minister of finance, minister of financial services, and the people around them seem determined to come up with a new vision, come up with innovation, and so on. And they've had there has been a number of consultations, within the industry, which I think is very good. So the intention is clear and is good, which we didn't even have before. Huh? So the intention is clear and good. I'm not talking about this or that government. I'm talking about previous political leaders, whichever party they were. So I do see that good intention, and I do see that in the industry, there seems to start to have consensus now towards the direction in which we need to go, more value added, focus on Africa. So I'll come back to your specific question, focus on Africa, but do not forget our role also for other corridors of investment and trade flows, including India, obviously, but not only India. So there seems to be some form of consensus, but there are still areas which need to be probed further and a bigger vision to also come out of it. So more specifically to your question in relation to Africa, I think we need to be realistic. If you look at the continent, the African continent, we're the most eastern African country.
Yes.
And geographically, that puts us also as really the closest African country to Asia. And at the same time, due to our history, we've got a big connection with Europe, Francophone as well as Anglophone Europe and the Western world. So we are in a unique position to be able to really, as I prefer to say a business hub than a financial center. I think we need to be a business hub. This ought to be the vision. It's beyond being the financial center. Financial center is part of being a business hub. And I think we do have the possibility to think big and to say, how can we be a business hub that really connects countries in Africa, within business within Africa, into Africa, and out of Africa. So for me, if we want to be meaningful as a business hub, it's got to do with Africa. It has got to do with Africa. And the rest we should not ignore, but the rest will be, in my view, small compared to what we have to do with and for Africa. Obviously, because Africa, as many other continents, doesn't exist alone, there's plenty of flows, investment and trade, coming from outside as well. So we need to be connected with other places in the world. So this is where we can play a very interesting game. I think if there's one thing which has worked well for our country since independence. It's been the positioning of Mauritius as being a bit non-aligned to any specific country or bloc.
Yes.
We've always talked to the Africans as well as to South Africa at the time of apartheid. We've always been talking to the US as well as Russia, China, India, and so on. So we've always been able to play that game with intelligence. And this has served us as a small country. This has fueled our growth. And we need to continue to do that. But at the same time, when you think about it, it is very sad to see that our embassies do not reflect at all
Fully agree.
what they should reflect.
The potential, yeah.
Not at all. If you look at the African continent, I think we've got 5 or 6 embassies. And we want to say that we are a hub or gateway for Africa. It looks like a joke.
Yes.
So that's why I think we've achieved, well, not too badly. But what we can do is like 20 times, 30 times what we've done. So the potential is really, really big. If we think big and we give ourselves the real will to do things differently. Yeah. Economic diplomacy, embassies, having the right people in embassies is very important. You can't always put political appointees who don't understand the business. You need to have the right people.
I fully agree with that. When I see, for example, with what I think she's done a great job, when I look at the work that the British High Commissioner has done in Mauritius, is she's, you know, when she came on the podcast a couple of years ago and she said our focus was, Chagos is dealt with, but her other focuses were education and trade, encouraging trade. And, you know, she's been very active with connecting the various players. And if, obviously she's a civil servant, it's not a political nominee, but if we had this similar model and deploy, maybe not 52 countries, but choose 20 and deploy Mauritians with real will to connect. And also and perhaps it's unfair of me, but you know, because we are a relatively well-to-do African country, sometimes we feel that, oh, this is Africa and this is Mauritius, we've arrived. But I think it requires a lot of humility as well to be able to say, no, these are our brothers and sisters. Yes. We're not better than them. We should look to collaborate with them instead of, you know, perhaps that's where we got the perception that we are depriving Africa of its tax revenues. It's that image as well that, you know, we're a tax haven and we're,
You're right. And I think to that point, the way that we look at Africa, when I say Africa, all the countries of Africa, is what are we bringing to them? What are we bringing to them? They have over time seen more the tax that they think they lose than what the FDI that we help them to get.
Exactly.
So how do we, as a financial center and hopefully as a business hub in the future, how do we really fuel the right capital, proper, clean money into their country? How do we, I think, and I've been saying that for many, many years, we should be forthcoming and take the initiative and be proactive in going and renegotiating our double taxation agreements with many African countries. Because it's not fair, isn't it, that, for example, if there's a Mauritius company, a GBC, that is investing in a country, investing in a mining resource, that the capital gains is the taxing rights is in Mauritius, because the value of the capital
lies
gains
in the land.
Lies in the land. We shouldn't have the taxing rights for that. And yet our treaties take the taxing rights, which obviously other countries are not happy with. Legally speaking, we're not doing anything wrong, but ethically, it's wrong. And business-wise, it's wrong, because you're not treating the other country at par. You're taking too much for yourself. We are taking too much for ourselves. So we need to go and renegotiate our treaties in advance of people coming to us. So that's one thing. The second thing which I think we need to do is really sign economic cooperation agreements with countries. Stop thinking of DTAs and IPPAs. These are important, but it's only one component of a broader cooperation agreement. We go to Kenya, we go to Nigeria or to other countries, Tanzania or whatever. How can we work together? How can we let us understand your vision? We are a small country, no threat. We're a small country, and how can we help you? How can we help you? How can we, for example, you've got possibly unemployed graduates. We have a shortage of people. How can we connect with your universities? How can we work like, facilitating the flow of people, the flow of capital, the flow of trade? How can we really work together? The DTA will be only part of it. How can we help you establish special economic zones that are connected with ours? There's so many things when you look at your partners at the same level, eye to eye, rather than saying, we need the best treaties, we need to take. No, that's not the way.
Take. Yeah.
And again, we need to have embassies there with the right people, and the people who should sit there should not be necessarily Mauritians. It's better that it is a Tanzanian who sits in Tanzania, help Mauritius and Tanzania do business together.
Yes.
They know the place. There could be one Mauritian and 3 Tanzanians, for example. I'm saying So we need to really think like this, whether it is for the embassies or for EDB officers, but we need to relook at that. That is a key point about doing business with people. You can't do business with people if you're not treating them right. And I don't think we're treating other African countries right.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. And we saw when it backfired in our own faces. I remember a few years ago, maybe it was 2016 or 2017, where we were so resistant to the whole BEPS thing initially, before we were on the blacklist. And we had the opportunity to put these African jurisdictions in the MLI, the multilateral instrument.
Yes.
And we said no. Next thing we knew, Senegal terminated the treaty.
Yeah. You see? Yeah, that's the point.
And now we're still it's still not enforced.
Of course.
We're still renegotiated.
We're losing. Everybody, it's a lose-lose, in fact.
Exactly.
It's a complete
exactly.
lose-lose.
I just think that was a great shame. It's just one of many examples. You mentioned something that I think is another huge issue. I don't think it's unsolvable, but I think it requires a change in mindset. And I think you touched on it briefly, which is the labor shortage. A huge problem. We see it everywhere, not just in the financial services sector. We see it in the hotel sector. You go to any supermarket or petrol station anywhere now, we're having to import foreign labor, which is in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it still requires a shift in mindset, because I think there's still a lot of resistance, still a bit of denial, maybe a little bit. Do you have a magic formula?
Of course I don't. But I think the first thing is to do a proper analysis of the situation. My personal view is that what is happening to us today, that emigration of our workforce, is different compared to what we used to have as immigration years and years ago in the 70s, 80s. Because I think today, in many sectors, financial services, hospitality, even nursing, and many different sectors, IT, people are leaving because, in my view, we've reached a certain world-class level. Why are our people leaving to go to Luxembourg? It's because Luxembourg is seeing them as, they're world-class. And it's important for us to realize that. So we are paying the price of our success.
Our success, yeah.
So it's different from what happened before. I'm not saying everybody who's leaving is in the same situation, but a lot of it is the same for hospitality. Why are we losing our people in hospitality? It's because they've reached that level. So what does it tell us? It tells us that, but then if we reach that level, why can't we retain them? Obviously, one thing is about the pay. The pay is so different. So I think in many sectors, in financial services pays more than other sectors, generally speaking, but still we need to do a better effort to pay the people. But also we need to be realistic. We're a small country. If someone has the opportunity to go and work in a more reputed financial center, they will leave. If someone is working in a hotel in Mauritius, has a chance to work in a bigger hotel in a bigger country or on a cruise ship, they will leave. Pay has got to do with it, but it's not that. So we have to understand that, and we need then to see, okay, how do we relook at our immigration policy? So there's no magic wand, but I think it's a question of taking stock of what's happening, analyzing it, and then replacing. We need to have a real policy of intelligent immigration and connection, as I was mentioning, with other universities, working with people and actually embracing immigration. We need to embrace it, but with the right policies and with the right strategies.
Yeah.
I think that is very, very important.
I fully agree with you. And I think the embracing part is very important. That's something that Dr. Sitanan said when he was on the podcast, that, you know, Mauritians have always been travelers. They were welcomed in other countries when they emigrated in the 70s, 80s, etc. And we should do the same. We shouldn't be, as you said, victim of our own success. We shouldn't look down on those who are coming to our country. We should embrace them and welcome them, instead of seeing them merely as foreigners.
But you know, we're talking about Africa. I think also what we need to, in the financial service sector, what we've seen recently is that large companies have purchased the homegrown Mauritian management companies and so on.
Yes.
But I think many people are saying that is wrong. Personally, I don't think it's wrong. It's again a sign of
level of maturity.
Level of quality of service. And the thing is to, again, embrace it and say, okay, grateful that these big companies are coming to Mauritius. There are multinationals investing in our country. They're bringing their own standards to us. We need to learn from them. So the question is, instead of pushing back on that and saying, no, that's not value added, we should rather, in my view, say, how can we add more value? And you know, one way to do that is, instead of seeing us as a back office center, I think we should say, okay, our people have the ability to deal directly with end clients and top clients in the world through the experience we've had with GBCs. How can we, when we talk to, you know, that multinational who's, let's say, a multinational A who's now having an MC in Mauritius, how can we talk to them, but also to their clients? So we're not back officing them. We're actually doing and working with their clients. When you think about that and you say, which means that if we're talking to the clients of their company, which is in Ireland or Luxembourg, we're actually talking to anybody in the world.
Yes.
And therefore, we can make Mauritius a true administration center, which is recognized for wherever the company is registered. It doesn't need to be a GBC registered in Mauritius. We still can talk to that end client. And when you think about that, well, then I think we're seeing
opportunities are
endless. So that's why I think we should not be looking at back office. We should be taking the advantage of these big companies here and going more like the mid-office offshoring center. And once we're able to do that, we're raising the value added, and then the labor shortage will be even higher. We'll have to have an immigration policy. So there are tremendous opportunities, not only with Africa, if you see what I mean. So definitely with Africa, but not only with Africa. So there are other opportunities as well. That's why the vision of government needs to be clear. The industry needs to be able to have some consensus around that, rather than some people are, you know,
low-hanging fruit and all that short-term vision. Yeah. Thank you so much, Richard. I've got one last question for you before you go, and this is completely left field, has nothing to do with our previous, well, a little bit maybe. So today, what do you think your mission in life is?
Well, I think I've always felt that personally my mission has been, I was lucky enough to have, not to have, but to have written my mission statement when I was 35 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
To be honest, it happened through a course of 7 Habits of Most Effective People, which I've
got that book on my library.
Yeah, great principles.
Yes.
So I wrote my mission, and then I wrote my mission again a couple of years ago, and the mission changes. My mission, I think, has got to do with trying to help people to grow in whatever way. That's why I've engaged also in executive coaching.
Yes.
Because I think that's a way to try to make it a bit more structured. And today, I think, with the age I have, it's also about legacy. So it's what do you leave behind you? And I think When you're 35, when you're 40, you do not necessarily, that doesn't sort of, it doesn't
stand out. Yeah,
it
you're
doesn't
still
stand
trying to
out.
make your own print at
Yes.
that age. Yeah.
But then at a point in time, you realize that you have the responsibility to leave something behind, whatever, to your family, to the bigger community, to in whatever form of legacy. So my mission embraces or takes into account this part as well, making the people grow and then also leaving some form of legacy. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Richard. I'm very grateful for your time today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Joanne. Thanks.